Motocross and Trails wanted to know how to write a song like No One Knows by Queens of the Stone Age. Fortunately for us all, it follows some pretty common songwriting conventions, and the ingredients used to make it unique boil down to three things, being the tone, a strict adherence to rhythm, and the harmonic minor scale. Here's what I came up with. Let's go piece by piece so you can get a much deeper idea. Simply, everything is dirty. The drums are dry, the guitars are fuzzy, and the bass is gnarly. To dive into more detail, the drums are very short and sharp. Lots of rock drums have these huge room sounds or reverbs on them that make them sound super hyped, kind of like they're in a stadium. These drums are pretty squashed and distorted, which helps get a lot of movement out of the mix to assist the groove. So if we listen to this drum groove, this is what it sounds like with the compressor on. All right, we can see here that it's kind of got a fair bit of clipping, soft clipping going on, which is just a soft distortion. If we turn that off, it sounds like this. See how the drums sound a fair bit smaller with that? Now what we're going to do is increase the room sound on the mix and see how that affects things. It sounds bigger, but in a different way. So to me, with the more room sound, it's the drums sound longer and they sound like they're in space. They sound a bit less specific. You know, you have less of the transient, less of the attack. If you turn on the compressor, you get a kind of bigger, fatter sound that is a bit longer, but it's just kind of a different taste. It's more aggressive. It maintains more of that smack, but that's just the way that I describe it. So let's roll that room sound back and flick the compressor back on and off and see how that changes. Moving on to the guitar sounds, this is what I landed on. Which is the Archetype Gojira plugin with the dirt pedal on. That's the only thing that's on in this whole chain, is just a kind of dirty fuzz pedal. Is what I was looking for. I've then also got the Bogren Digital Amp Knob BDH5169. God, that is a mouthful to say. On about 4.5 points of gain. I don't know what to call that, but the pedal is not on here. Now onto bass tone. I used Submission Audio's Grove bass. I had the distortion on while I was writing, and then when I decided that I was done writing, I flicked it over to the DI and saw what came out. So this is what it sounds like with just the distortion on the Grove bass. It's definitely cleaner and easier to hear what the notes are played, but this song is supposed to have a dirty, dirty vibe. If we flick over to the DI, I chucked on Parallax by Neural DSP, and I just found a bass tone that works. If we flick through a couple of these, we're going to get some different tonal options, but at the end of the day, you're going to see that it's a trade-off. Some might have more top end, some might have more bottom end, but I found that this one was just really good with my guitar tone, and I didn't need to change it. You see how in a couple of those, you might get a bit more something or a bit less something, and some they just totally disappear, and others they're really present. I found that all round 2 suited my purposes best. My tip here is that once you've chosen a tone that you think you like for either the guitars or the bass, you find another tone that complements the instrument that you've already solidified. It doesn't matter if the bass sounds epic on its own, if it's only going to be listened to with guitars. If that's the case, you've got to match it to the source tone and then just move on. Don't think about it too much unless it really bothers you. Aside from that, the vocal tone is pretty gentle. We've got a pretty grubby, dirty soundtrack going on so far. If we have aggressive vocals, it could be overwhelming. But I think the point of this song is not to have that hyper aggression going on. I feel like it's a bit of an uncomfortable situation, or it's like you wish things could have been better, but it's not like the singer's hyper aggressive about what's going on in No One Knows. It should be comfortable, it should be nice. Moving on to rhythm, No One Knows is around 165 BPM. Every beat seems to have equal importance, and there is no question about where the groove should be. We're locked into this pattern from the very beginning of the song, and it's maintained pretty much the whole way through. I personally consider this groove to be swung, but a case could be made that it's a triplet feel. The difference being that swung is a bit looser than a strict triplet. To me, this song sounds organic. It doesn't sound mechanical in that way. So I kind of lean towards it being swung, but whatever, it's up to your discretion, really. The whole point of it is that the beat pulls to the groove, so you want to dance. You know when the beat's supposed to come. There's a lot of anticipation for this. You can do this straight or with semiquavers, but that's not the effect that we're going for in No One Knows. We're going to aim for the triplets because that's what they use. Now, in some parts of this song, like the chorus, this relentless kind of groove is broken, and it's deliberately made non-specific. It's a way of creating variation. If the song was just an intense beat the whole time, it could become exhausting. By having these moments of levity and reprieve from that intense driving beat, we get a lot more variation and in turn, change up the emotional impact of the song. And this also serves to increase the impact of this beat when it does eventually return. The only other thing that really needs to be mentioned here, even though this song is very fast, there is a lot of space. Every single note is short, space, short, space. Long held chords work against what we're trying to do here, so keep that in mind. The harmonic minor scale is used in No One Knows. The bass is mostly playing a low C and a C an octave higher, with the occasional walk up around the bass line, with the guitars playing their riff, dancing between the open C and the 4th, 3rd, and 1st scale degree 2 octaves higher. The vocals mostly use stepwise motion, going from the C to the D to the E flat. Occasionally they do go up to the F, which are the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th scale degrees. The chorus changes significantly where the main groove is broken, and the vocals do the first big leap, which is of a perfect 5th, which is also the highest note that we hear. That's kind of it. So how to use this information, it's actually pretty simple. Once we got the drums, the bass, and the guitar tone, we find a groove. What I did in my song was pretty simple, ensuring that the drums follow the beat very closely. The main groove consists of a kick and a hat or a snare and a hat, never a kick and a snare together, and very rarely do I use other drums. There are some bigger fills that I do to create levity, like No One Knows, for a change in section, and I borrowed the chorus idea of No One Knows, where there's kind of some big impacts or something that follow the vocals or enhance the vocals before we go back into a driving groove. So here's the drum groove leading into the pre-chorus in pink, leading into the chorus in green. So you see, it's not too difficult what I'm doing there. It's just kind of trying to create things and enhance them in the way that Dave Grohl might have if he were writing this song instead of No One Knows. But I'm not Dave Grohl, so I'm just kind of bastardizing it in the best way I know how. And then guitars and bass are just doing some really simple stuff, making sure that they keep with this rhythm and keep with the simplicity of the song. Just adding a bit of vibe to fatten out the drums. Once we've settled on a groove, we write a riff that complements this groove. You can kind of do anything that you want, just make sure that you keep the groove going, and if you want to play it safe, stick to the harmonic minor. For myself, I did want to take it a step away from what Queens of the Stone Age did, so instead of copying the octave dance that the bass does in No One Knows, I opted to keep it closer to the open string. This is a small step away from what Queens of the Stone Age do, but I've always found that if you do several of these small steps away, you end up with a song that sounds like it's a leap away instead of sounds like a copy. Like Queens of the Stone Age, I made the verse riff different to the main riff of the song. I usually like riffs that feel a bit more simple to go under the verse vocals. I also use stepwise motion in my verse melody. I used a little pre-chorus moment to give a break to this driving rhythm that we've heard the whole way through, and similar to No One Knows, I made sure the riff was a huge departure from what we'd heard before. Instead of the leap of the 5th that is used in No One Knows, I chose to climb up from the 3rd to the 7th. The highest note in my chorus is higher than the highest note in No One Knows, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter what we do so long as we're keeping it in the same universe, something that feels like it might belong on the same album, and we're good to go. I also made a point to go into my falsetto because that's what they do. So to summarize everything, all that I did here was pretty simple. You take what Queens of the Stone Age did and do it in your own way. You use what you think is useful and you throw out what you think is working against your song. Naturally, I think the song that I've written is too derivative of Queens of the Stone Age, but that was what Motocross and Trails wanted me to do. If I were to release it as my own composition, I would change a few things starting with the tone and then probably the vocal melody. If you're wanting to use this video as a framework to create music like this, I would suggest writing 5 songs with the instructions that I've laid out to you, and then your 6th song is the one that you're not using this video anymore. You should already have a pattern for approaching music like this, but by not using this specific framework, you are going to allow yourself to come up with something a lot more original, a lot different to what has come if you're just following this framework. If you want simpler rules on how to write a song, then jump on my playlist about how to write a song, and that will kind of go through all the basics for you. What song, artist, or album would you like me to do next? Leave it in the comments below, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.